Pacing mountain is a useful metaphor as a means to explain the concept of pacing. Often we find that pacing is relatively easy to explain, but often quite hard to do. We won't be addressing some of the challenges of pacing in this video, more the concepts of how to explain it and then how to do it. This pacing metaphor was really taken from the work of Lorimer Moseley and Explain Pain. I found it quite useful to explain the concept of pacing to patients, either one-to-one or on the pain management program. And also you can draw it out for them and let them take it away as a reminder of what you've discussed. So we've got 3 mountains. Before we had pain, now that we've got persistent pain, and hopefully the future. A number of things just to explain first. So we've got TT and PBP, which means protection by pain and then tissue tolerance. So before we had any pain problems, we would go to a big mountain in the Lake District and we'd start to climb up this mountain. So depending on our existing fitness level, we would get probably 3/4 of the way up this mountain or so and start to get, maybe pain in our knees, pain in our shoulders from carrying a rucksack, etc. We'd largely ignore that pain because we know it's normal. We know we're doing something physically challenging, and ultimately we know that we're relatively safe. If we carried on and the pain continued and the pain got worse and worse and worse and we didn't stop, eventually we would reach this TT, or this tissue tolerance level, whereby if you go beyond that, then you're probably highly likely to injure yourself. I would suggest this probably doesn't happen very much in daily life, and this kind of pushing beyond tissue tolerance you would maybe see in sporting events or some of the multi-marathon events that people do, where they start to get pain in the feet, but they ignore it because they're in a race, they continue and they do lots of miles. Eventually they reach their tissue tolerance level and they can get fractures in the feet. Normal life really means that we would go back to this mountain on a week-by-week basis, and as we get fitter and stronger, we would get less protection by pain and an increased tissue tolerance, so things would get easier and these levels would go to the top of the mountain. So really the protection by pain is the brain and the central nervous system's way of protecting us, letting us know our kind of interaction with the environment and giving us that information in relation to the environment. When we then have pain that has been ongoing, we're probably not as fit and strong as we used to be physically, but also we have this kind of increased pain sensitivity. So the protection by pain level is new and is lower, and you also have a new and lower tissue tolerance level, which means that you might start doing something physical like climbing a mountain, which is what you used to do. You're going to get your protection by pain a lot sooner. And also this tissue tolerance level will be lower than it used to be. So depending on the individual, the gap between the protection by pain and the tissue tolerance may vary. Some might have a higher one, some people might have a smaller one. Also, a lot of people that we work with might have pain before they even start doing activity. So what often we find is that I think this protection by pain level can often be not necessarily ignored, but factored in, or people push through. The problem with that is that you can hit a flare-up line quite easily, and so you can do too much, place too much strain on your system and your tissues, and then you'll need to rest for a few days, and sometimes we continue that kind of boom and bust cycle. So the answer is to explain or try to kind of find what we call a buffer zone between the protection by pain and the tissue tolerance, whereby we know that it hurts, but it is safe. And that's a key message I try to get across. We're in pain, but we're not creating damage. So you can't damage yourself by doing normal day-to-day activities. but also you would sometimes compare that to running 5 marathons in a row. So what we need to try to do is find and establish a baseline. And again, that's easier said than done, but really what we're looking at is effort levels really versus pain levels. I would go on to explain that pain level is not necessarily an accurate representation of what is happening to the person at the time. A good example of that is potentially using something like gardening. So maybe people need to garden for about half an hour before their back starts to hurt. But let's say that it's a nice sunny day, they've got the radio playing, they need to plant 15 plants or so, and it's going to take them about 45 minutes. But the sun's shining and they're getting warmed up, so they keep going. But ultimately, because they've got some of those distractions and you're getting some of the endorphin released from doing exercise, pain might actually then become a little bit of a late warning sign. So they've already done too much and already pushed themselves a little bit too much. So just focusing on pain levels is not an accurate means to determine what's happening. So it's much preferred to try and find this effort level. An effort level comes really into what is repeatable on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis. So we're looking at about 50% effort, or half of your maximum, or around 5 out of 10 on an effort scale. So 10 being too hard, 0 being too easy. So if you can find and establish a baseline of around 50%, a good example is often walking. So sometimes people say, oh, I can walk for 20 minutes, but that's kind of my maximum. So could we reduce that to 10 minutes? But that then is repeatable each day without necessarily creating flare-up. Over time, hopefully we're going to get fitter and stronger, and some of the pain sensitivity or pain alarms might reduce, so we can get further up this metaphorical mountain with our functional ability. It doesn't mean we're going to be pain-free, but we can do more, which is quite a nice place to be. So just to kind of summarize, before the normal system, where the brain and the central nervous system is protecting us by pain, as the activity is challenging, you're going to experience some discomfort in your tissues and your body. But with repetition, with training, this activity becomes easier over time. So as we get fitter, we get less protection by pain. Now, the problem when we've got longer term pain, our fitness has been reduced, and also we've got this increased sensitivity within the central nervous system. So we get pain quicker or sooner. So we have a lower protection by pain and a lower tissue tolerance level. Pain comes earlier to protect you, and we get those flare-ups when we overdo it. So sometimes I talk about pain being a bit like a dog, and if we keep poking it with a stick by pushing our activities too much, then it's going to bite us. So can we learn to go for a walk with the pain dog instead? That's maybe another presentation. So trying to find baseline, and this really is the key principle for people as a takeaway. So reducing potentially currently what they're doing, so not pushing themselves all the time. So trying to reduce that effort level to about 50%. That can then create a reduced pain focus. So pain isn't deciding or dictating what activity we're going to do today. More rehab focused and looking at that improved function over time. So hopefully in the future, find your baseline, repeat it. What we repeat generally gets easier, and then over time, hopefully we're going to get an improved protection by pain and an improved tissue tolerance. It's not as easy as it is to do as it is to explain. It does need planning, it does need practice and effort and patience. Flare-ups will be reduced, hopefully, but they'll still happen. So we need that wellness recovery plan that we can talk about on another video. Hopefully that's helpful. As I say, worth writing out for your clients or refer them to this video. Thank you very much.